Oh, what the hell? Hello, and welcome to my review of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Fearing a burnout from the series, I took some time away after finishing Odyssey, but I'm back, and I finally finished Valhalla. Assassin's Creed returns with its 12th mainline entry, and on November 10th, 2020, we got to live and fight as a glory-seeking Viking. I'll give you my thoughts and opinions throughout this video, and sum up my feelings towards the end. Taking place in 873 CE, it's firmly planted in the Age of Vikings, which saw large-scale raids, conquest, and the colonization of mainland Europe, the British Isles, and beyond. You'll play as a 9th century Viking named Eivor, and your journey begins when you follow your brother Sigurd to England to settle a new home and hunt for glory. Don't worry about which Eivor to play, because you can freely change between the two at any time, or even let the game choose for you. Using a slightly updated game engine from the one that was used in Origins and Odyssey, it's no surprise the game looks very similar, perhaps even disappointingly similar to my eyes. That's not to say it looks bad, because obviously that's not the case, but I guess I just wanted a little more. Origins and Odyssey had that initial wow factor that Valhalla was missing. It still looks really good though. The dynamic day and night cycle breathed life into the game, and the vistas of the picturesque English landscape eventually made up for any muted first impressions.
So to England, glory and destiny!
To England!
To England! For Valhalla!
You can practically feel the stress leave your body as you gaze upon her rolling hills. From the harsh winters of Norway to the lush green temperate lands of England, run, ride, climb, and sail your way through England's rivers to discover new lands. While the game looks very good, optimization from Ubisoft as of late has always left something to be desired, especially on PCs. Turning up the visual settings can heavily tax systems, but aside from hardware limitations, I experienced bugs on numerous occasions that ranged from humorous to extremely annoying. None of the bugs and glitches have been too severe, but everyone's experience may be different. Whoa, what was that? I've encountered bugs that have prevented mission progress, but a restart was able to fix things. Unfortunately, crashes happen from time to time, and certain locations like major cities and some raids were prone to crashing over and over and over again, which was incredibly frustrating. The stress that left earlier is now rushing back. If I crashed in an open field, I'll likely not have lost more than a minute of progress thanks to the autosave feature. But if I was in an enemy fortress or taking part in a raid, then any progress during that time would have been lost because it doesn't save until you're outside of enemy territory. Thankfully, the autosave feature was very active, but the few instances where I lost more than 10 minutes of progress were pretty fucking annoying. As you settle in foreign lands, you'll forge alliances with the fractured kingdoms of England on behalf of your brother and Jarl. Coming along for the journey are some of your brother's weird new friends from an organization called the Hidden Ones, who will teach you about their ideology. Wary of their intentions, you'll help them eliminate members of an ancient order only if your goals align. Though you play as Eivor, the main story arc will follow Sigurd's ambition to carve his legacy in England, that will tie into some really interesting Assassin's Creed lore. The secondary arc uncovers the Order of the Ancients' influence over the English kingdoms that is inescapably woven into Sigurd's destiny. There's also a third arc that deals with Eivor's visions shown through Norse mythology, that will draw some parallels to the primary arc. I enjoyed the story. It was fun, interesting, and generally compelling, but is held back by its repetitive structure. The Order of the Ancient plays a major role that ties in well with Sigurd's story, but leaves room for improvement towards the end, as it doesn't line up perfectly with the conclusion of Sigurd's arc. If you don't keep up with killing the members of the Order during the story, then you could be spending quite some time after the conclusion of Sigurd's arc extinguishing the remaining members, if you decide to do it at all. It's quite a shame because the second half of the Order's arc and the Norse arc feels quite optional when I think they could have been better integrated. This holds doubly true for the Animus Anomalies because they provide some fantastic lore, but is hidden behind 10 inconspicuous puzzles. I wish it was more clear that I should be doing them because the payoff for doing these seemingly insignificant puzzles was quite good. As mentioned before, You'll travel from region to region, from kingdom to kingdom, and there are a lot of places to visit. Each mini arc consists of a set of missions to forge an alliance with one region. Once that's complete, new areas will unlock with another set of missions to do it all over again. And after doing this a dozen times, some of them just ended up blending in with one another because there wasn't enough variety between them, leading to pacing issues and some boring arcs. In previous Assassin's Creed games, you had a dozen, maybe 24 Templars to take out, but with the new RPG AC games, you have the head of the order who's hidden behind 5 lieutenants, and each of those lieutenants are locked behind an additional 5 members. And then there are also zealots that don't do anything except ride horses and look pretty. I think half of them should have been cut to make the storytelling more streamlined, because most of them aren't integrated into the story, and the repetition and pacing problems that arise from this is the main thing that holds back the story from really shining through. Vast riches are hidden throughout the world that can be revealed by exploring and activating synchronization points. Wealth, mysteries, and artifacts are differentiated by different colors and icons. Collecting wealth can provide new gear, new skills, or resources. Mysteries are puzzles or short encounters. These encounters weren't full side quests, but were mostly self-contained events that had little to no influence on the world. You can even participate in a 9th century version of a rap battle called Flighting.
What's it like being tiny, an ant in the loam?
What's it like feigning hugeness? You're not but a gnome.
Yeah, pretty exciting stuff. However, some of the mysteries resemble your typical fetch quest, like catching 10 brown trout to offer at an altar, which was pretty lame. Artifacts provide cosmetic tattoos, clues for scavenger hunts, or collectibles you can trade in. You can also hunt legendary animals to turn in for resources or gear, or even play some dice games to pass the time. Sorry, it's not as good as Gwent. Some of the side activities were fun, with cultural references to things such as Winnie the Pooh and Portal, but most of it was repetitive and spaced a little too far apart, so it's a bit of a hit or miss. Leveling will give you skill points, and your power level increases with each skill point you spend, giving you stat increases and new abilities. The skill tree is divided into 3 sections that each favor a different style of play. The Way of the Bear focuses on melee prowess, while the Raven skills focus on stealth, and the Wolf favors ranged combat. You can eventually get everything if you get to a high enough level. The leveling system was all pretty standard, and there wasn't anything wrong with it. They've also reintroduced the home base. You can raid monasteries marked on the map by 2 red axes to steal supplies to build settlement structures. Some of these are required to continue the story or unlock side quests, and some will open up a way to turn in some of those collectibles you found. Building the settlement was pretty cool until I got to the last level, because the last level just became grindy. You can select from a handful of different preset difficulty options that further lets you fine-tune individual settings. For example, you can adjust damage done, damage taken, timing windows for parrying or detection, all independently from one another. Setting the game to hard or above will scale up lower level enemies. The combat was pretty fun, and gory with brutal animations. I found it slower paced than Odyssey, but it's not slow by any means. You have a dozen or so combinations of weapons and shields to choose from that will change your fighting style, which is cool. Using your bow and light and heavy attacks has a satisfying feel that will build adrenaline for unique abilities. A perfectly timed parry was extremely satisfying and can knock enemies off balance, giving you an opening to deal massive damage. Killing enemies will end in brutal finisher animations that you can turn off in the settings if you ever grow tired of them. The controls for combat were pretty good for the most part. It was a little finicky when locking onto targets, but overall they were accurate and responsive. In the midst of war, English settlements weren't that dense, and their cities had been decaying after the fall of the Roman Empire. You can use Odin's vision to mark enemies and persons of interest to sneak around them, but the little amount of stealth the game had, I didn't care for. Don't expect anything close to the black box missions from Unity or Syndicate. They brought back social stealth, but it was pretty close to useless, so I was mostly relegated to hiding in tall grass once again. However, I am a big fan of the revamped Assassinations. You can take down low level targets in one hit, but once your enemy is high enough level, assassinations are no longer guaranteed. Unlocking advanced assassinations will allow you to take down more resilient targets by timing your strikes perfectly. There's an option to turn on guaranteed assassinations in the options menu, but I actually like the advanced assassination mechanic. Valhalla's approach with Assassinations was an improvement, but this was still anchored by the lackluster stealth, meaning a full frontal assault will still be your primary way of dealing with things. England is vast and mostly open, which made me very thankful for the fast travel points. You'll either sail by longship or ride on horseback to activate these points. However, on foot I was rather disappointed, which was a bit of a shock. Even basic running was surprisingly not very smooth at times. I found myself getting stuck on rocks, ledges, corners, and just about every tiny pixel. There weren't many opportunities to parkour, and the few times I could, it was just alright. The controls for traversal were fine, but it felt a little slow overall. The loot was very disappointing, especially since I liked the amount of variety I got from Odyssey. With many different armor and weapon designs, you got to customize your character however you wanted. But in Valhalla, this was significantly pared back, and you only got a few sets of armor to choose from. You can still transfer the look of your armor from another, but must be done so at your settlement, which again is another step back. One thing that had me scratching my head were the tattoos, because while it's a purely cosmetic choice, the only tattoos you really see are the ones on your face, unless you're one of those weirdos that run around with your shirt off the whole game. There are so many tattoo designs you can find for your arms and torso, but really, it seems like a wasted effort on the developer's part. I'd easily sacrifice 100 tattoos for a few more armor sets. Now, let's get into the music. I honestly didn't care for the music at first. From the more memorable soundtracks of Origins and Odyssey, Valhalla takes a more subtle approach. The music did eventually grow on me, and I ended up liking a handful of songs because it captured some of that mysticism, but I don't think there'll be any tracks that'll stick in my mind over the previous installments. Considering the names that worked on this soundtrack, I'm surprised it lacks the punch that this game needs. The sound design was pretty good overall. I like the details they put into the sounds. Each weapon and bow type sounded different. For example, if you carried a flail, you'll even hear the chain rattle as you run. That stuff is nice, and they did a good job with the sounds. The voice acting was pretty good, and they only recycled a few lines for very minor NPCs. Though there were some minor quirks with pronunciations being different, even from people within the same region, which was a bit odd. But overall, both Eivors did a fine job, and that holds true for many of the major characters such as Sigurd and Basim. The dialogue was serviceable. It mainly came down to the writing just being okay. Once again, you have some romance options, and the charisma system was a nice way to reward players for participating in some of the flights. I think this game has issues with its store, and how you feel about it will largely come down to your own perspective. You can buy experience boosts, which aren't necessary since you can just turn down the difficulty setting if you find it too hard. The weapons and mounts you're given in the game are cool, but not when you put them side by side with the ones you can buy with real money. I'd like to use them, but not at an additional cost. These weren't the most intrusive microtransactions, but I'm not a fan of them because they make the game feel incomplete. So, we finally made it to the end. Would I recommend this game? Only under certain conditions, because this game definitely isn't for everyone. If you've played Odyssey and really enjoyed it, then this will be very similar. Not only is it a long game, but it also feels long. But if you're itching to explore 9th century England or dive into Norse mythology, then this is for you. And to be fair, the game has a lot to offer. It has a good story and some fantastic lore, but the question is, are you willing to spend the time for it? Let's go over some of those things. To sum things up, I thought the game did some things really well and improved on some things, but simultaneously also regressed in other areas. The world was awesome to look at, but once again, too big. Music? I eventually came to enjoy it, but it's not memorable. Game pacing? Has issues and is slow. Characters? Some were interesting. Voice acting? Solid with some minor quirks. Dialogue? Was fine. Sound design? Pretty good. Lots of variety. Traversal? Surprisingly unrefined. It felt like a step back. Combat? It was fun, but I enjoyed Odyssey's faster paced combat more. Loot system? Lacking and hollow. Collectibles? Hit or miss, and repetitive. Leveling system? Pretty standard. Progression? I liked the settlement, but leveling was a bit grindy. Assassinations? I really like the changes they made. This may be the best system to date. Stealth? Disappointing, more or less on par with Odyssey. Side missions? They were okay. Microtransactions? Thanks, I hate it. So, did Thor's hammer strike gold and deliver the glory we seek? It's funny because when compared to Origins or Odyssey, my initial impressions of Valhalla were pretty unfavorable, but it does have some good elements. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is an interesting game and a paradoxical one. The world has a lot of stuff in it, and yet I found traveling through it surprisingly zen, almost mind-numbingly empty at times. Traveling through the remnants of Roman Britannia as the city decays, watching it become lost to the annals of time, was awesome. Exploring the natural beauties of the English countryside granted me access to some incredible views. The main reason I play these is because I love seeing the history and being transported to a different time period, but I don't want to be there forever. The main issue with Valhalla isn't how many hours it takes to complete, but rather that it feels longer than it needs to be because of the pacing. It's so close to being a very good game, and it's so close to being a game I could recommend across the board. It's nearly there because it improves on things from its predecessors, like the Assassinations, while also taking some things away that I really liked, such as the variety and loot. I think Valhalla's story was an interesting one, but it still suffers from pacing issues that replaces one form of repetitiveness for another. While I thought Odyssey suffers from a level grind, Valhalla suffers from repetitive missions that could have been improved with some better writing, or if some of the story arcs were cut out. Placed next to Odyssey, Valhalla largely seems like a lateral move. At the end of the day, I enjoyed Valhalla for the most part, but I'm ready for the series to return to the dense, vibrant, and bustling cities that can showcase the parkour that the franchise is known for. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you've played or decide to play Valhalla, let me know how your experience was and what you hope to see in the next title. Until next time, see ya.
For we who fight, for we who fall.